let's talk about the essential midday meal, lunch. Now, some of these tips could definitely be applied to breakfast or dinner as well, but for today's purposes, we're going to focus in on lunchtime. Obviously, it's going to depend if you are dancing professionally and going straight back into rehearsals after eating, or if perhaps you have more time between lunch and when you dance. You will want to make sure that if you eat something bigger or a meal that has more volume, like a large salad or something like that you have at least 60 to 90 minutes to allow yourself to rest and digest before going back to dance. That's true for any meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Give yourself 60 to 90 minutes between eating and starting to dance, so that you don't feel heavy or weighed down by the food. You don't want to feel stomach discomfort at the bar. That's really unpleasant. So give yourself the time and space to think about when to eat, when it's going to be most effective, and all of that. As I said, only have a more voluminous meal, a meal that has more volume, like a salad, if you do have that time to digest. So it might or might not work during lunch. If you don't have time to digest at lunch and you have to have something smaller, use smaller containers, but bring your leftover dinner from the night before, perhaps a quinoa salad or a rice-based dish with vegetables and a healthy fat-based sauce. This way, if you bring it in a smaller container, something that holds just about 3/4 of a cup, maybe half a cup of food, it's a small quantity. So even though it might be a filling meal, it's not going to make you feel heavy or weighed down by the food. Another tactic that a lot of dancers take, especially if you're already dancing professionally and you have rehearsals right away, this is something that you might need to employ even if you are not professional yet, but dancing at night, having small snacks throughout the evening or throughout the afternoon. These can be things like vegetables and hummus, trail mix, fruit and nut butter, smoothies, little things that are not particularly heavy and also don't take a ton of time for your body to work through. When I teach in the evening, I have a Larabar that I will break up in my breaks. So I'll have just one small piece of it during each break. And then by the end of the night, I'm hungry. I'm ready for dinner. But when I get home, I'm not totally ravenous. I have given myself some sustenance so that, I feel taken care of, but at the same time, I am ready for dinner when I get home. So that's when you have to come up with your quick dinner plan. So this might be something like soup that's already made and you just heat it up. If you're going to use a canned soup, that can work as well. I recommend brands like Amy's. Just read the ingredients, make sure that everything in there agrees with you. But Amy's soups tend to be more focused on vegetables and nutrient-dense foods. Most of her stuff is vegan or vegetarian. With those canned soups, though, here's a tidbit, here's a little trick. I always add vegetables, whether that is in the form of more broccoli, chopped up kale, carrot, whatever it is, usually greens. I definitely focus in on greens when I'm adding vegetables to a soup. And broccoli and kale are two of my favorites, so those do tend to be the ones that I focus on and tend to add to these things. But you have to have something quick. If I'm not having that, since it has been warmer weather, but it's shifting now, but in the warmer weather, I'll have fake ice cream, which is just basically banana and frozen berries blended up with a splash of unsweetened almond milk, and then I'll put in nut butter. Sometimes I even do some non-dairy chocolate chips, and that serves as dinner. That's not something I would recommend for dinner 7 nights a week, but for these nights when you're getting home late and you don't want to inundate your system with a huge meal or something that is super heavy before, heading to bed shortly thereafter, have something small like this that can satisfy you and make you feel you don't want to go to bed hungry. That's just like the worst thing. So something like that. Back to lunch. That's what we're talking about, right? Lunch tips. Yes. Hard-boiled eggs, homemade granola. Don't feel like you have to eat typical lunch foods at lunchtime. You might have oatmeal at lunch. That could work great. So reframe how you think about what foods you should eat at what time of day. I do think that as we get into warmer weather, going back to soup, I think that can be one of the best things for a midday meal because it's nourishing and comforting and can be very nutrient dense, have lots of vegetables, lots of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients in it, but it's not super heavy. And again, you might have to watch the quantity. Like perhaps you don't eat as large an amount as you typically would or might even desire in that moment. Go a little bit less just so that you don't make yourself feel super heavy before going back in to dance.
So another super important lunch tip, and one that can also be applied to breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or should be applied to breakfast, lunch, or dinner, is to think about protein, carbs, and fat, and to make sure that you're employing and using all of those food groups, all of those macronutrients in each meal. Why? Well, because the fat is going to help you to feel satisfied, the carbs are going to give you some energy, and the protein is so important for muscle repair and replenishment. So think about your meals as you set them up, starting with vegetables. Always start with the vegetables. And remember that vegetables are also providing a little bit of protein and they're providing carbohydrates. So starting with your vegetables as always the primary focus of a meal. Then think about how you might add some additional protein. Maybe that is through beans or tofu or meat. Whatever it is that you use in your diet, make sure that you're getting some protein. Again, don't feel like it has to be a main component or like you have to have a huge quantity of protein at every meal. We tend to go overboard with protein and we're all kind of obsessed with it. So it's easy to go to the extreme. Don't get so obsessed about it. Make sure that you have some though. And then healthy fat. Maybe that is in the form of avocado or nuts or seeds, or one of my favorite ways to use healthy fats is making a dressing for your meal. So that's going to give it some flavor. So never feel like your meal should be tasteless or lacking joy or fulfillment. Use the sauce that has the healthy fat to give it some flavor. There are tons of great sauce recipes that use avocado as a healthy fat. Tahini is my go-to. Anyone who's ever worked with me knows that I'm kind of obsessed with tahini and I'll talk about it all the time. But it's one of the easiest ways to make a really delicious, nutty, healthy fat-based dressing. And it has tons of beautiful health benefits. So that's an easy way to make sure you're getting in your protein, carbs, and fat. And don't forget, just because you have carbs from the vegetables doesn't mean you can't also have a grain in there. Quinoa or brown rice. Those things they're gluten-free, so they work for most people as far as digestion goes, and they're super delicious, and they contain nutrients as well. So win-win-win situation.
So I'd love to hear in the comments, what is your lunch tactic? You can share a little bit about your schedule and how that might impact what you choose to eat for lunch, but share with us what is your go-to for lunch, and let us know how it's working for you. Thank you so much once more for tuning in, and we'll be in touch soon.